As I've tried to explain many times, the right to vote, it is not a God-given right guaranteed to everybody regardless of anything.
Well, that's because God doesn't exist. But, my Reddit atheism aside, that's also because we don't base our laws off of God-given rights, whatever you would call them. The rights that we have and the laws that guarantee we have them are not given to us by God. They're given to us by man, specifically people who are in power that have hopefully been elected into those positions by popular will in order to draft the policy that creates our law. And I don't know if we need to get Schoolhouse Rock up for Matt Walsh to help him learn how the government works. But if you're suggesting that people don't understand enough about how the government works and those people shouldn't be allowed to vote, you're almost making yourself ineligible to vote with this commentary. Like, we don't base shit off of God-given rights, quote unquote. But that's what he wants to do. He wants a Christian theocratic dictatorship in this country. So coming off of the heels of a very piss-poor midterm performance and now going into the 2024 election cycle, people like Matt Walsh and many other of his ideological allies within the Republican Party have decided that, well, if we can't energize people to vote for us, and in fact it seems to hurt us, if we actually advocate on the things that we want to do in this country, like, say, limiting people's reproductive freedom, restricting their civil rights, just being eliminationist toward queer people. If all of that doesn't get people to come out and vote for us, particularly independents and middle-of-the-road voters, well then, what other option do we have, really? I mean, you forced my hand here. What do you want me to do? If you're not going to vote for me when I put the slap on your tail, then, hey, forget about it. I'm going to have to get rid of your ability to vote. That's what we're at now. And this is not a new concept. This has actually been the Republican Party platform for a long time, along with the Southern strategy. The idea that, well, if you can't actually energize people to vote for you because they realize that you're just a hateful party that only seeks to serve corporate interests and the interests of the mega wealthy, and you actually end up passing policies that hurt the lower classes in this country, and routinely cut a variety of programs specifically designed to help them, once people realize how elitist of a party the Republican Party is, they stop being interested in voting. And the only way you can kind of get them to vote is through energizing them out of fear and hatred and disgust, which is what they try to do about immigration, which is what they try to do about Black Americans, which is what they try to do about queer people, which is what they try to do about their pro-forced birth positions that they call pro-life, quote unquote. That's what they have to do. And it's not working as well. Unfortunately for them, and fortunately for the good of mankind and humanity, it is not working as well as they would have hoped. And because of this, the millennials, and particularly Gen Z, are actually incredibly progressive. They're not very conservative as they age. So the only option that the Republican Party has left is to continue their project and go a little bit more full steam ahead on it when it comes to removing and restricting the people that don't vote for them, that's restricting their civil right to vote. That's what we're at. They've done this with gerrymandering over the years. They've done this with voter suppression over many, many years, decades. And that was primarily to maintain their stranglehold on the Electoral College in the states in the South, particularly, that they could reliably have vote for them. Because through gerrymandering and voter suppression, you just get to pick your voters rather than the voters picking you. But that isn't working anymore because of the changing tides in our culture and in the younger generations. So now they need to try to restrict voting to even more people. Because they realize that, historically speaking, the higher voter turnout is, the more likely it is for a Democrat to win. The lower voter turnout is, the more likely it is for Republicans to win. They understand this. They've been understanding this for a long time. Some of the most powerful people in the Republican Party and the Republican Party strategists have literally said that we don't want everybody to vote. That's that guy's words. I forget his fucking name. He's some powerful guy in the Republican Party way back when. Literally said that he doesn't want everybody to vote, and he's called it like Goo government shit. I forget who the fuck that was. Paul Weyrich, yes. Paul Weyrich, who's a very powerful Republican back in the day, literally telling you that he doesn't want everybody to vote. Founding father of the conservative movement.
Now, many of our Christians have what I call the goo syndrome. Good government. They want everybody to vote. I don't want everybody to vote. Elections are not won by a majority of people. They never have been from the beginning of our country, and they are not now. As a matter of fact, our leverage...
This is from the 1980s. You know, our representative democracy, our constitutional republic. Apparently, to these people, all the way back into 1980 and before, have understood that the Republican Party is not popular enough to win popular elections, and because of this, they have to make sure that they can win through other means. They can't win a popularity contest, so they have to instead restrict people's ability to vote. And we also had Vivek Ramaswamy talk about how people under 21 or whatever shouldn't be allowed to vote. So you'd be old enough to enlist in the military, but you're not old enough to vote for the people that make the decision to send you on whatever missions that the military would have you on. Somehow that makes sense. And now Matt Walsh has come out. It's been a long time since we covered this guy, with another take on universal voting rights, which we can only assume to be very illuminating. From the powerful mind of Matt Walsh. Remember, by the way, when this guy said he was going to stop posting on YouTube and focus solely on videos on Twitter? Yeah, that didn't last long, because he realized how stupid of an idea it was. I tried to find this video on YouTube to get the whole thing, but I could only find this clip, mostly because I think this is on Daily Wire Plus, and not on his main YouTube channel, and I'm not paying for that garbage. So, this is what we got.
These people should not be allowed to vote. I mean, you hear people say that in a half-joking way. Oh, I can't believe these people can vote. But really, they shouldn't be able to.
Who's they, by the way? Unfortunately, I imagine there's, context before this as to what demographic he's particularly talking about, or demographics. And it does get into it more into the clip. But we can only, through the things that he's said about a variety of demographics in the past and their propensity to vote and who they tend to vote for, we can only imagine which specific demographic groups he's going to be likely to be talking about. I think, if I remember correctly, because I did see this clip in the past, he's talking in a more general sense, probably to try to evade some of the criticism that people would have. But we know who he's trying to talk about here. It's a variety of minority groups, and particularly groups that don't often vote Republican. That's it.
They should not be able to vote. That should be something that that becomes a serious topic of conversation. Okay, like the kind of thing that comes up at presidential debates.
Which it hasn't yet, by the way, except I think for Vivek talking about wanting to limit it to, was it 25? Anyone under the age of 25 to be ineligible to vote. He also, in the debate that just happened today at time of filming the 27th, also said that he wants to end birthright citizenship, which would have made him ineligible to receive his citizenship, which means he would be ineligible to run for president. So that's funny. He's a funny guy, you know?
Okay, like an issue that political parties have to deal with in their platforms. We should really be talking about this. That there are a lot of people who are voting in this country who should not have that right.
And why is that?
They don't deserve it. And as I've tried to explain many times, the right to vote, it is not a God-given right guaranteed to everybody regardless of anything.
Well, that's because God doesn't exist. But, my Reddit atheism aside, that's also because we don't base our laws off of God-given rights, whatever you would call those. We base them off of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, which were written by humans. The Founding Fathers, some may say, were kind of bad dudes. Some, I assume, were good people as well. The rights that we have and the laws that guarantee we have them are not given to us by God. They're given to us by man. Specifically, people who are in power, who have the power, that have hopefully been elected into those positions by popular will, the will of the people, in order to draft the policy that creates our laws. And I don't know if we need to get Schoolhouse Rock up for Matt Walsh to help him learn how the government works. But if you're suggesting that people don't understand enough about how the government works and those people shouldn't be allowed to vote, you're almost making yourself ineligible to vote with this commentary. Like, we don't base shit off of God-given rights, quote unquote. But that's what he wants to do, right? He's only saying this not because he thinks that our current laws are so-called God-given, but that he wants them to be. Because he's delusional to the point that he actually thinks there's a man in the sky, and he would be able to send down edicts to us common human folk. And he wants a Christian theocratic dictatorship in this country. Or at least an authoritarian regime. Maybe it's not just a single strong man, but a couple of them.
It's not. Okay, it's not fundamental to your human nature that you automatically are entitled to have a say over the political system in your country.
Yeah, that's because it's fundamental to the Constitution. the Bill of Rights, the laws that have been drafted and written by man in order to keep civil society running. So you're right, it's not a natural process to write laws. It's not a natural process to form government. That's a thing that humans have invented. You know, primitive humans may have had a semblance of a kind of authority structure to keep their civilizations moving, and even into tribal stages of human development and whatnot, but those are still constructs of man. There may be hierarchies in other species that are not as intelligent as Homo sapiens. There might be hierarchies, but they don't have anything close to what looks like human civil society. And that's because we invented it. We made it up. So this idea that there's some kind of natural law or God-given law is ludicrous, and to suggest that should make you ineligible to vote, because that's not how that works. And if you don't understand that that's not how that works, then how could you possibly understand what you're voting on?
There are some basic guidelines that should be in place. You should have to earn that right. Not everybody should have it.
What other rights do you think we should have to earn, Matt Walsh? That's my question. What other rights do you think humans should have to earn? Because simply voting, that's a pretty up there right to have, right? There's some investment going on there. One, it's not compulsory, even though it should be. We should have mandatory voting to increase our voter participation, because we have some of the lowest in the developed world, which is a benefit to Republicans, which is why they try to keep it that way. But it's not compulsory currently, so you don't have to vote. But there are other rights out there, or things that humans require to live, that are compulsory, like having to eat food to survive, having to drink clean water in order to stay hydrated, having to have a roof over your head and a pot to piss in order to stay sane, physically safe, to be able to care for yourself, your loved ones, raise a family in safety. All of these things are compulsory, because without them, you suffer all manner of negative side effects. And I'm not saying compulsory on the part of the government. The government's not forcing you to live in a house. In fact, they don't often work hard enough to build more affordable housing to make sure that people who are unhoused in this country actually have a house to go to. But they're compulsory in the sense that you require them to live, and without them, you either die or live a terrible life. And that only drags other people in society down, right? Because they're required for human beings to live and prosper. Even primitive humans needed rudimentary structures in order to be safer from the elements, from predators, from disease. They needed food and water. The idea that we don't provide this and have it be a guaranteed right by the government, because that's currently who we get our rights from, is actually blasphemous in the sense of, what Jesus Christ thought and taught about. But of course, the Antichrist Matt Walsh is going to try to sell you a different story and tell you that Jesus Christ and God, should they exist, would actually be okay with the current state of people in this country having to pay money for basic needs that humans require to live.
And it is so incredibly obvious that if you are an absolute oblivious moron who knows nothing about your own country or the political or the government that runs it, then you shouldn't have any say over it.
So unfortunately, this is precluding and disenfranchising the entirety of the Daily Wire following. All the people that watch this garbage, Matt Walsh, Ben Shapiro, Candace Owens, whoever else, would not be allowed to vote anymore. Because I can guarantee you these motherfuckers don't know how a government works, because they constantly advocate for shit that are unconstitutional. And in this video clip by itself, this minute 42 video clip, Matt Walsh has demonstrated he doesn't understand how government works. He doesn't understand how we get our laws and how they're enforced. He's suggesting that there's some kind of God-given right that exists as a concept, but that's not true. We get our laws, we get our rights from the governments we live under. So you're just disenfranchising the voter base you're hoping to vote wretched ghouls in the Republican Party into power in order to, liquefy trans people or whatever Matt Walsh fantasizes about before he goes to bed at night. It's just not working like that, man. I'm sorry. But that's literally what it is. The Republican Party understands that the more their reliable voter demographic ages out the boomers, the older people in this country, and more the younger generation becomes more politically involved because they are increasingly more and more progressive, the less likely it is for Republicans to vote. There's that graph that I've talked about in previous videos about how it used to be the trend, not only just in the USA, but in the UK, bruv, as well, where the older a generation got, the more likely they were to vote for the conservative party, in our case, the Republicans. But the millennials, and that's just the millennials, right? Not even to mention Gen Z. They've actually bucked that trend and are doing the opposite. The older the millennials get, the more likely they are to not vote Republican and, in fact, vote Democrat and be more progressive in their views. They understand this, and that's why they're panicking. That's why they want to make it like Vivek does, so that people under the age of 25 cannot vote. Because he understands, he sees the writing on the wall, that it's not working anymore. The Republican strategy is not working anymore because their voter base is dying out. Not only because they're getting older, but also a lot of them, unfortunately, rest in peace, passed because of Republican inaction on COVID. They're noticing shit ain't working because they lost to a fucking decrepit lich like Joe Brandon in the last election with an incumbent president. They see what's going to happen to them if they don't do something drastic, and that's what this is. Limiting people's access to the vote even more than they already have. The gerrymandering wasn't enough. The voter suppression wasn't enough. In local races and state races, it certainly is, but federally for the presidential election, not so much. The electoral college even is not enough because they lost to Brandon. And the electoral college is what has allowed for Republicans to continue to win elections because all it is a participation trophy for Republicans, for conservatives. Because if we based our voting system on the popular vote, they would never win an election. Both Trump and Bush lost the popular vote, but still won because of the Electoral College, which was just a gift to slave owners. I think we can do away with it. So they see that their time is running out. You're witnessing the potential death throes of the Republican Party and the conservative project in this country. And unless they smarten up and start to moderate their positions, like a lot of people in their party are trying to do, but failing to against the MAGA Trump Republicans, which is the majority of them, they're just going to continue on this path unless they can rig the vote in their favor more than they already do. It's as simple as that. And it's very telling. I like to see things like this. Not that I like to see the advocacy to limit people from voting, but rather I like to see that they're willingly being open about this shit. Like presidential candidates like Vivek Ramaswamy, who's actually polling fairly well compared to the other people, the other Humegalos on the stage, are talking about it in public as part of their platform. Reducing people's access to the vote is becoming a plank of the Republican Party, and that is because they are in desperation mode. I like to see him squirm. I like to see the worry on people like Matt Walsh's face because they so often have nothing to worry about. Feels good. Now, that is to say that you should still get out there and vote. You should still get out there and advocate to move past the first past the post system, which is yet another participation trophy, not only for the Republican Party, who it helps a lot, but also the Democratic Party when it comes to intra-Democratic Party politics in the primary, when it comes to trying to get progressives into a seat of power because third parties are currently ineligible. Because of the first past the post system, we need a proportional voting system before they could be. You should be getting out there and advocating for the best option in the Democratic primary, the furthest left, most progressive, best candidate. And you should be voting for the least bad option in the general election, which is always going to be the Democrats. There is never going to be a time in your life that the Republican Party is going to be preferable to the Democratic Party if current trends continue. You'll have to hold your nose and vote for the Democratic Party. The cool thing about that is there is so much more than that you can do. All electoral politics does at the federal level in a general election is buy us time. At the local and state level, you can actually get a lot of good shit done like we've seen in Wisconsin, like we've seen in Minnesota, like we've seen in a lot of other blue states. Pennsylvania, a swing state with Josh Shapiro, has been doing some good shit. A lot of these like governor seats and stuff, there's actually a lot of power that you can wield to move things in a leftward direction. But when it comes to the federal election, all that does is buy time. The general election just buys time, and we need that time, right? I would rather have somebody take their feet off of the accelerator if we're, careening toward a cliff. I'd rather them take their feet off like the Democratic Party rather than go full steam ahead like the Republicans. And ideally, we would have a further left option that's actually willing to hit the fucking brakes. But there's so much more you could be doing. Extra electorally, organizing in your community, unionizing your workplace, supporting striking workers, doing mutual aid, volunteering to help the unhoused. There are so many things that you can do as well outside of that. And what's cool about that is that you can do that the other 365 days of the year, whereas voting only happens once, twice a year. You have a lot more time, theoretically, to do extra electoral shit than electoral shit. So you might as well do the bare minimum civic engagement and cast that vote. Because clearly, if voting was ineffective, they wouldn't be trying so hard to stop you from being able to do it. That's enough.